Welcome to Keith Knight Don't Tread on Anyone. Today we are talking about a very special book. It's this one right here, Freedom Through Memedom. Now, it is so difficult to get someone to read, say, a copy of For a New Liberty by Murray Rothbard or Man, Economy, and State. So our guest today, Mance, has given us the gift of a 31-day guide to understanding voluntarism, libertarianism, and it's just off the charts. To be honest, I cheated and I read it in one setting. I'm very excited to have Mance on today. Mance, how are you, brother?
I'm doing really good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. So tell me how you became a libertarian and what made you want to write this book and why it's important.
Okay, I became a libertarian. I guess I would say that I came from the right, not so much socially conservative, but politically conservative. But I knew once the wars started and once 2004, 2005 came around, I honestly started to believe that this was going to be an endless war, that this was designed to be an endless war. And I became disillusioned. And 2007 rolled around. The job I was working at the time had one guy there who was liked to talk about politics all the time. He had a subscription to Rush Limbaugh's Insider thing. So, he was, and I would listen to I listened to Rush every once in a while. I stopped listening to Rush in 2004 when I was listening to a show and he said, "The reason I do this is so that you don't have to think about these things. I'll think about these things for you and I'll tell you what to believe." He actually said that.
So
and
nice.
It wasn't ironic. I wish it was ironic. It was not ironic. And he would always compare himself to he was as brilliant as not Alito, but Justice Scalia and everything. And I just got turned off by that. 2007, just working, concentrating on life, and started watching the debates. And just like Dave Smith talks about the Ron Paul Giuliani moment, where he said, "They hate us because we're bombing them." Everybody ganged up on him. Everybody on the stage ganged up on him. And I said, if politicians hate hearing this so much, politicians, which Dr. Paul was a professional politician, honestly, if you're honest, but if they hate hearing this so much, there's got to be something about it. So I started following him, and he had a book on policy at the time. It was the only book that I could get my hands on. And I read it like cover to cover. I think it was just basically a collection of his speeches before the House, and it just blew me away. So, after when he didn't get, when he couldn't even get 10% in states that he should have probably won, like Nevada and states that are historically libertarian, I became disillusioned and still followed everything. 2010, there was a Campaign for Liberty event in Atlanta. And by that time, I was flirting with anarcho-capitalism, voluntarism. Ron Paul was there. Lou Rockwell was there. Tom DiLorenzo was there. Tom Woods was there. I got to hang out with Tom Woods and Tom DiLorenzo for hours. While they were at that time hawking books. They had like a table set up and they would just sit there and they'd hawk books and sign books and everything. So I just got to stand there and talk to them for hours. Then I got to have a meal with Ron Paul and Lou Rockwell. And what's funny is I was more impressed with Ron Paul. And to this day, Lou Rockwell is probably a bigger influence on me. And at that conference, I picked up The Left, the Right, and the State by Lou Rockwell. I had him sign it, and I took it with me. And over the next 2 days, and I'm talking about a huge book about America's foreign policy, I I devoured that book. I mean, if you see my copy of that book, it's every page has something underlined or notes written in the column. And from that moment on, I had no trust in the state whatsoever. And that brings me up to, last year, looking at the election. I had, for the last 6 years, I've just been working. I was doing some agorism. I was not, I was working off the books, you might say. And then I was offered a job, more money than I could, and I switched over to that job. And then I started looking at when I started looking at the election last year, and I still held hopes that Rand Paul might have a chance of getting in there, and that he could, at least change something, do something about taxes or do something. And when I saw that it was going to be Trump and Hillary, I just, I was fooling myself, thinking that through the state we were going to change the state. I had allowed myself to be fooled once again. Yeah, and I just abandoned it completely. Went on Twitter, started posting memes, I mean, when I started posting memes, I had like 35 followers, and I just built it and built it and built it and built it, and just posted memes every day like I still do. And started building it, started doing my podcast with, right before I did my podcast. Do you know who Vin Armani is?
I do. Yeah, I follow him on Twitter.
He follows me. I follow him. He's where I get all my now pretty much if I have any questions on cryptocurrency, I contact him. But he had direct messaged me and said, dude, they're powerful. They change people's mind. He said they're a tool. He goes, and you're doing it right. Figure out something you can do with it. Now, this was actually after I'd started doing my podcast, and my first few podcasts were like, I guess my first 10 were 15, 20-minute range on a certain subject, and I'd rant. And then after I talked to him, I had the idea of just doing still doing podcasts like that, but doing a meme of the day podcast where I do a 3 to 6 minute comment on a meme. And that, plus listening to an episode of Tom Woods where he was talking to the dude who does Freedom Tunes, and they were talking about just finding something you can do to get liberty out there. I mean, this guy doing Freedom Tunes is doing these 2 to 3 minute videos that people love, talks about liberty. And, Tom said, he goes, if some people want to become a lawyer and specialize in taxes so that they can, figure out the least amount of taxes that people can pay and just be an expert on that, to do, to find something to do, find something to do to spread liberty. And I a bunch of years ago, more years than I care to admit, I was doing accounting for a Christian bookstore. And I noticed they had all these books that were what they call daily devotionals. And they usually lasted over 31 days. Some of them were a lot bigger and went over 6 months. What it would do, it was like a Bible verse and then commentary. And I noticed they sold a lot of those. And I deduced that the reason they sold a lot of those is because most people are very busy. They don't have a lot of time in the morning. It's something for them to read, even when they're on the toilet or something like that. And it's less than, most of them could be, I looked at a couple of them, and most of them could be read in less than 5 minutes. The idea for my book was that I would pick a meme a day. And if you look at, you've seen the book, some of the days have 2 memes. They are normally in the same subject matter, and to do a commentary on it. But I wanted to do it building off of, the most simple message we have, all the way to, I think day 1 is of course, you have to start with taxation as theft. And so that's what day one's about, all the way down to day 31, which I think is about that we just can't, we can't trust the media. And that going over a history of some of the things the media does. But you've read it. I assume you read it pretty much, probably close to one sitting. So each day when I read it was less than 5 minutes. But what I like to think, and my whole goal is that in that 5 minutes, I would hammer you with so much information that you'd think about it the rest of the day. And I try to be funny sometimes, tried to be surreal sometimes. I love Hunter, is one of my biggest influences, in his writing used to come out they used to publish stuff in Creative Loafing every week, and I would rush just to read that. And I just think that a book like that, the whole purpose of this book is to give it to somebody who is interested in libertarianism, a libertarian who is thinking about crossing over to anarcho-capitalism, or for an anarcho-capitalist to buy it and give it to people that they know. Because I hate to say it, the reason why memes are so popular is because people just don't have attention spans anymore. They don't. I mean, they do. They just don't use them. I mean, Scott Horton's book, Fool's Errand, is just mind-boggling. But the first chapter is like 60 pages. And that was like I read it on a plane ride up to New York. Just the first chapter. But by the first chapter, I understood. God, I understood why Afghanistan was such a clusterfuck. I mean, he spelled out why we were there in that first chapter. And stuff that I knew, but I couldn't put together. And he just brought it all together. And that was my goal. My goal with this book is to bring it all together. I mean, you've read it. You know that I don't only talk about politics. I also talk a little bit about culture. And I talk about social justice warriors, people that are going to call you Nazis, people that are going to straw man you, the fight for 15 people. And I don't go into a lot of economics because I'm more on the philosophy side. But I've read my economics. I mean, I think anyone who's read Hazlitt, Economics in One Lesson, can pretty much destroy any of the major economists, and can destroy anything, any government program, anything that's going on. But I've read Man, Economy, and State cover to cover. So I mean, I know all that stuff, but the philosophy of it, just how wrong and how immoral the state and their control is, and how they carry it out, how you're not allowed to speak back to or question a police officer. That if a police officer is trying to, tells you to stop, and you've done absolutely nothing wrong, you have to stop. If you don't stop, they're going to escalate that to the point of violence and even death. And how the fuck did we allow that to happen? How did we allow a class of people over us? Because we're such indoor cats now that we can't take care of ourselves. This book is all about people, and I hope I make the case that the state is obsolete, that we don't need it anymore, and that if we keep it, it worse, and we're going to lose the freedoms that we do have, and it's only going to get worse and worse, especially the more terrorist attacks, or especially domestic. I don't think it's any. I'm not the greatest conspiracy theorist and the biggest conspiracy theorist in the world, but all this domestic stuff, this is leading us somewhere. This is leading us down a path.
Sure. By the way, one thing that came to mind when you were talking about Rand Paul running and Donald Trump getting ahead, my favorite moment in the debates is Trump saying, the TPP does nothing to address China's currency manipulation. Okay, first of all, have you heard of the Federal Reserve? And then, okay, and then what happens is they're going to commercial, and Rand Paul goes, one thing it's important to mention, China's not part of the deal. And Trump responds, the great intellectual, with, Rand Paul has less than 1%. It's just unbelievable that someone who brings any intellect into this cloud of mind control called government, politicians, they look so different than literally everyone else. You made a great point about the attention span of people. And what's even more difficult is when you want to convince someone who really has their heels dug into statism, giving them a book of Fool's Errand or something, or Against the State by Lou Rockwell. They're not going to have the attention span, let alone the attention span to read something that totally is against everything they've pledged their allegiance to 5 days a week in government schools for the last 12 years. So there are two things that do an unbelievable job of doing a quick introduction to get people thinking and planting the libertarian seed. The first one was a seminar I went to by Larkin Rose called Candles in the Dark. And we brought 3 statists in, and Larkin paid him $50 for 15 minutes just to answer some questions. And they were just red pill questions. What rights does a group, let's call them the Congress group, what rights does that group have that Walmart doesn't have? Can Walmart's CEO pass executive orders? What if every 4 years you got to vote for the CEO of Walmart? Then could they tax you? Then could they regulate you? Then could they enact drug laws and tell you how to use your body and stuff like that? And these things, like these people, only very open-minded people accept it in the first place, but they would literally sit there and go, oh my gosh, I've been so focused with Trump, Russia, Hillary's sickness, did Obama say 57 states, all this trivial garbage. Meanwhile, the entire state is like super philosophically illegitimate, that it's just crazy. So that is the first one. The Most Dangerous Superstition is Larkin Rose's book. And then I gotta say that this book really closely rivals it, because if I could send someone a meme, they're gonna read it. If I send them a book, assuming they know how to read, they would not read it. There is a part, and this is the only thing I'm going to give away in the book. By the way, if my stamp of approval isn't enough, Scott Horton wrote the foreword to this book. Very nice.
You have no idea. You have no idea how humbled I am by that.
Yeah, well, it's quite the endorsement.
He's one of the most important voices that we have today.
Sure. And okay, so the only thing I'm going to give away about the book is Mance talks about just the double standard of things we apply to a regular person versus what we apply to government employees. And so instead of saying the minimum wage is wrong because those are all things that people have an emotional attachment to. The war in Iraq, oh, I lost a brother there, so you can't talk about it. He just gets into the philosophical differences that blatantly expose the state for what it is. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, before or after we talked last, you had a trip to Iceland. I was wondering, are there any cultural, political differences that you really see? So when I go to California, it's so much more commie than in Phoenix, Arizona. But I want to ask you, what in Iceland stood out to you, if anything?
Well, I did a podcast. I think the day I got back, the day after I got back. The title was "My Trip to Iceland: The Closest to Anarchy I've Ever Been," with a question mark. And the reason I put that there is I got to the airport. It's a 40-minute drive to Reykjavik, the capital. I was staying 2 minutes outside of Reykjavik. I literally just drove down the street, hung a right, went down a couple blocks, made a turn. I'm in Reykjavik. I was there for 10 days, 11 days, I never saw one police officer ever, not even at the airport. And I looked for them to the point where we'd be walking in Reykjavik and we'd see a bakery we wanted to go in. We'd go in the bakery, I'd come out and I'd be like, and I'd see someone standing on the corner and I'd look at my wife and I'd say, you think he's like undercover cop? And it got to the point where my wife's like, shut the fuck up, leave me alone. Because we never saw a police officer there. Now I met with someone that I met on Facebook like 5 years ago who lives there. Originally, she's lived there for like 10 years. She's an anarchist. She would probably be, she's probably closer to, I wouldn't say communism because she still likes to make money, but she might be even be going towards transhumanism, where a lot of things should be automated by now. And I talked to her, and she's like, yeah, it's very rare that you see a police officer. She said, I've only ever had interaction in 10 years a couple times. And she told me that she thinks in a country of 320,000 people where the overwhelming majority live in and around Reykjavik, there's only 300 police officers on the whole island. So it was actually, it was amazing. And if you know anything about Iceland right now, they just had elections and like the Green Party won, but they didn't really have a mandate. So they were going to try and get together with the Republicans and the Pirate Party and try and come up with a coalition. Basically, they don't even have a government right now. They don't. And, another thing about them is their president is just a figurehead, has no power whatsoever, can't do executive orders, can't do anything like that. Can't even be a Caesar. If enemies storm the gates, he can't even appoint himself general of the army or anything like that. So it was, for someone who grew up in New York, where there's a police officer on basically every corner, every other corner, being someplace where there was no police presence whatsoever. I was told that there were only 2 murders there this whole year, and both were committed by, one was committed by a sailor who had sailed in on a ship from Greenland, and the other was a tourist. And that's it. I mean, it was truly remarkable. I mean, the place is not a paradise. The place is so expensive for just everything. It's remarkable how expensive. I mean, they have to import so much. But as far as like walking around and feeling safe, and especially feeling safe that there's, not a police officer who's gonna, initiate conflict with you, and it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool, man. Next time we want to go back there, we'd probably wait a while, but I want to go back in the summer. Although the summer is rough because you can have 22 hours of sun during the summer, and I don't know how the hell, it'd be like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be walking around and I'd be like, oh, I want to go home and go to bed. You realize it's 5 o'clock, so. But yeah, I mean, it was truly like literally the closest to anarchy I've ever been, and it tells you it when you see stuff like that, it lets you know that if you have overwhelming violence in your culture, if you have overwhelming violence in your country, it's the culture. It is the culture, and this country has, this country was formed by being violent against a violent person, against a violent group. Don't let anybody tell you that the Native Americans who were here before us were these peace hippie lovey-doveys. No, they were constantly killing each other. There's a reason they were called savages. And I mean, they had some good ideas, and a lot of the ideas were adopted, but violence was used to get rid of them. Violence was used to take over the rest of the country. Violence has been used in wars to found the country. 30 years later, there's another conflict, and then the states fight against each other, and then you get the central banks, which start violence after violence, war after war after war after war after war. And I'm sorry, there is something about the human condition that if you're seeing violence on TV all the time, if to look up to are violent. I mean, Costa Rica doesn't have a standing army. When was the last time Switzerland? They've always been about peace. Iceland, when were they? I mean, the last time they had violence there was when Vikings, thousands of years, 1,000 years ago. It was truly remarkable. But I think our culture is one of violence, and I think that's why whenever anybody says, "Well, why do you think why do you think there's mass shootings and things like that and everything?" It's like that people are brought up on violence. There's violence everywhere. I really honestly think that I'm not blaming it on TV and blaming it on movies. I'm blaming it on how I was watching Major Crimes today, watching an episode of Major Crimes from TNT, and I thought to myself, okay, if you had a drinking game where every time they initiated violence against an innocent person, brought them in, kidnapped them, brought them in, interrogated them, threatened their life, threatened their family, threatened their way of life, you would die from an alcohol overdose 15 minutes into the show. I mean, we're surrounded by, everything's about violence. Everything's about initiating force.
And that there's definitely a misunderstanding, but a lot of the leftist culture immediately says guns equal violence. However, that's not entirely true. When you go to a gun show, and the ones I've been to in Arizona are unbelievably peaceful. There is no violence when people are carrying guns, even though there's the potential. I guess there's always potential, but people don't see violence as so. For example, Tim Wise, a leftist social justice warrior, says the right cling to their guns. We leftists don't need guns. And he literally believes that if the state uses guns, it's it's totally legitimate. But if a right-winger has a semi-auto in his house in fear of a Rodney King riot or government tyranny, whatever, that is the person you need to fear. So, I mean, we go 12 years in government schools, and I never once talked about property rights. Why is it wrong to initiate aggression? I didn't hear a consistent argument of why you shouldn't initiate aggression until like 2 years ago when I read Hans Hermann Hoppe's Argumentation Ethics, or when I read the first chapter of For a New Liberty by Murray Rothbard, or listened to a Stefan Molyneux YouTube video. It's unbelievable you can go so long without someone being able to explain the philosophy behind what aggression is, what violence is, the difference between defensive and aggression. It's just unbelievable.
I mean, we're basically taught that the way that our government handles conflict is by getting violent. So unless you're brought up in a home, and most homes are statist, unless you're brought up in a home where you are taught, the non-aggression principle or something as such, the golden rule, from a young age, you're honestly going to believe that that's the only way. I believe you're honestly. I mean, that's the way I grew up. If someone got in my face, you hit them, and it was they didn't even have to look like they were going to do anything. It was oh, let me do this before it escalates into anything. When it's very easy to de-escalate a lot of situations, but
And sure,
We live
I
in
always associated the heroes in society with the people in the military and the police. I always sort of had this, um, if only I could go into a war, and I would even think that it's cool to die in a war because that means you were a very noble person. Never once did it occur to me, okay, what is the war for? Is the war morally justified? If we're justified, if the U.S. military is justified in invading that country, is that country's military morally justified in invading the U.S.? Never did these things come up in the movies of Jarhead, of Saving Private Ryan, of basically any of the other. Here's why the military's virtuous. Those questions aren't asked. It's just this person sacrificed themselves for the collective. Don't question it. Thank them for their service, and we'll give them a 21 gun salute, and we're going to hug the crying wife after. It's like it's attempting to understand violence without any reason. People are just going to go, oh, the violent people get all the glory and attention, and it really does justify it in a sense.
The something that's very interesting is I saw it when it came out on Netflix. It's a movie called War Machine, and it was made by, I think it was made by Brad Pitt's group, and he stars in it. And I think he plays McChrystal. His character is not named McChrystal, but I think it's McChrystal. And it's the whole thing with that Rolling Stone reporter who screwed him over, and he thought he was off the record. And actually, it's the Rolling Stone reporter that claims that they were messing with his car, and he ended up driving into a tree. Like the morning, the guy woke up, went and asked his neighbor to borrow a car because he thought there was something wrong with his car. Somebody had been tampering with it. His neighbor told him to fuck off. He climbed in his car, went to drive it. His car drove into a tree. It exploded and killed him. Can't remember the guy's name right now. Mark something, I believe. But that's the whole thing of this movie War Machine. But the thing about this movie War Machine is it's the only movie that I know of where when you see the grunts, when you see the troops interacting, they're all going, "Why the fuck are we here?" And they're all like, "Why are we doing this?" Because, I mean, what the hell was the Chris Kyle movie?
American Sniper.
Oh, come on.
Unbelievable. I mean, there is a great video by Adam Kokesh where he stands outside the theater and says, "What'd you think of the movie?" And he just grills people on every single objection that they have. He goes, "Do people have the right to defend their country?" And a guy goes, "Yeah, absolutely," thinking he's talking about Chris Kyle. And he goes, "What country did the movie take place?" And he goes, "Well, they were in Iraq." And he goes, "So weren't the Iraqis defending their country? You just said you support people defending their country. What do you think about that?" The guy goes, "Look, man, you do not have my permission to put this online." And I love
terrorists.
When they say that. I love when they say that.
Well, and everybody's a terrorist now, because if everybody in Iraq is a terrorist, if everybody in Syria is a terrorist, and now Yemen, I mean, the latest American orchestrated genocide, then fuck them, we kill them. And that's basically what's going on. That's basically what's going on right now, and that's what all these movies, that movie, the Mark Wahlberg movie, the one set in Afghanistan, where he played a Navy SEAL. I mean, that's what these movies are all about. I mean, they did show friendlies in that movie, though. I will say that, God, what the hell? Soul Survivor? Not Soul Survivor.
Lone Survivor?
Lone Survivor. They did show that there were friendlies in that movie, and not everybody was. But it also it through that movie, and you were like, "Fuck yeah!" America. Man, that's the worst case of Stockholm syndrome you can think of, because that movie was telling a story of why the fuck are these guys there? Why are they there? I mean, there's no reason to be in Afghanistan right now. And Scott Horton talks about it in the first chapter of his book, not to give away the whole book, but he says that Osama bin Laden knew that he would never be able to militarily take on the United States. So what was his goal? His goal was, I'm going to get them into conflicts that they can never get out of. He goes, just like the United States orchestrated getting Russia into Afghanistan in a war that they couldn't win, I'm going to get the United States into a bunch of wars that they can't win. So they're going to stretch themselves out and they'll be at war constantly. And if he's alive in Barbados or Bermuda, I think Snowden says that he's alive in Bermuda. He's alive in the Bahamas. What I think he was dead. I personally think he was dead when they dropped a God, I forget the name of the bomb, but in 2001. I think he was dead in 2001. I think it's total propaganda what happened in 2011. But the another conspiracy theory, great.
Well, hold on. Let's just look at that event. The conspiracy theory is, where's the evidence? The most wanted man on the planet that we spent trillions of dollars and thousands of American lives on. Hey, we got him. Perfect. Show me the picture so a lot of people in New York can have a new screensaver. Show me the evidence that this guy died. No.
And just bury him at sea.
You even talk in your book. Lusitania had munitions, complete lie. Gulf of Tonkin, complete lie. The babies in incubators. The Iraq had WMDs. Not to mention Operation Northwoods, Operation Gladio. These things are so obvious. The government, who I wouldn't trust to tell me if there was fucking sand on the beach, got bin Laden on May 1st of all days, the communist holiday, and just isn't going to show a picture. Hey, I got the winning lottery ticket. Show me the lottery ticket. I'm not going to show it to you, but respect that I won it. It's so ridiculous. We would never have that standard for any other group except the group that people pledge their allegiance to. It's unbelievable. So that is just my little rant on the no evidence Obama, the no evidence bin Laden raid. Total garbage.
Yeah, I mean, there was he had porn, he had this. I mean, it's like, it's literally like they just created a cartoon character.
He had 9/11 truth. See, bin Laden had 9/11 truth, and he's a terrorist. Anyone in America that now has this, we can link to him. Unbelievable. Yeah. You know what? I think he also had a copy of Freedom Through Memedom, now that I think about it.
Oh, yeah. If he had that, I mean, that was a time-traveling son of a bitch.
Yeah. Well, hey, if they can identify a hijacker because his passport was found at Ground Zero, I believe you pre-wrote the book, sent it to bin Laden, and it was found in 2010. If that's the level of intellect we're dealing with, I'm just going to throw that one out there. I'm so sorry to get off on that rampage.
Jet fuel melts steel beams, but it doesn't melt passport paper.
It doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah. So the final thing I want to ask you. You were on the political right before becoming a voluntarist. Why is voluntarism economically and morally superior than conservatism or minarchism?
Well, conservatism and minarchism, you're going to have government regulation. We're going through this right now with the whole net neutrality thing. They put these laws into place, and it's going to save the internet. I mean, I've never, if you've been following this closely, the scare tactics are absolutely insane. Oh, you won't be able to, I saw one liberal say you'll be able to go into InfoWars, Breitbart, and Chernovich's website for free. But if you want to go into CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they also mentioned for free. And they said, if you want to go into CNN, MSNBC, or NBC or ABC or anything, you're going to have to pay $50 a month. You understand how business works, okay? It's like that meme that's going around. Ayn Rand and Paul Ryan walk into a bar with there's no regulations. They walk into a bar, they order a drink, they die because there was no regulation and they were poisoned. And my response to that meme is always, and now they're out of business. And now they're out of business. I mean,
well, just look at how long bootleggers during Prohibition stayed in business. And there was literally, the government wasn't regulating that, except the time, which this has been verified, that the government intentionally poisoned the alcohol and killed people in Prohibition. This is well before they injected people with syphilis in the Tuskegee experiment.
Yeah,
but without government, we'd be unsafe.
They were poisoning cane alcohol, because they knew people were using cane alcohol to make booze. But I mean, conservatism is, to borrow Michael Malice's line, is just progressivism driving the speed limit. There is no difference between conservatism and progressivism. It's just that progressives are in a rush to do all these things. Conservatives are taking their time, because you'll see now that things that progressives wanted to do 10 years ago, conservatives are slowly coming over to that side. There's regulation kills business. No business owner, it's in no business owner's best interest to, and like Walmart, okay? People can say, I've heard people say, Walmart is pushing all the mom and pops out. And they're using, I mean, they were saying this 10, 15 years ago. They're going to push all the mom and pops out. No, this is 20 years ago. I remember seeing shit on TV about this. They're going to push all the mom and pops out. All their prices are really low right now. But once they put everybody out of business, they're going to jack the prices up, because now they have the monopoly. Did that happen? No, you can still walk in there and get a friggin' pair of pants that'll last that you can wear every day for, 3 to 6 months for $10. When people start a business, they want to make money. They want to be. They want to be. A lot of people want to be in business for a long time. See, the problem is that nobody thinks, when you have crony capitalism, what we have right now, people aren't thinking about legacy. They're not thinking about handing it down to their grandchild or keeping it in the family forever. They're thinking about what are they making today? How much can they make today? I know so many business owners. I've actually worked for people who are like that. It's like, well, let's build, I'd be like, well, let's build the business. We don't have to do everything right now. Let's reach out. Let's do some outreach. Let's do some networking with business owners around here. No, we need to make this amount. We need to make this amount tomorrow. That's what regulation leads to. Is I don't know when they're going to institute more regulations. Or I don't know when they're going to hike taxes. It's going to take more from me. So I need to make as much as possible right now. I don't care about customer service. Quality is probably going to suffer, but we need to make this money right now before the government steps in and does something. In a voluntarist world where all transactions are voluntary, anybody can start a business. That worry is not there. Of course, it's in some people's personality that, yeah, sure, that's what they're going to want to do. But absence of all that regulation, people can take their time and grow, especially if they're keeping it all. If you start a business and, you start a business now and say you're a sole proprietor, single employee, you do everything. You could be grossing $2,000 a week, but after everything is taken away, after you pay your bills and after you pay your taxes, everything, you could be making $400 or $500 a week. Eliminate all those taxes and everything while you still have materials that you have to pay for, but how much more are you keeping? You grow your business. How much more can you invest? And that's another thing. These fucking leftists, another brainwashing tool that they use is that, people don't, businessmen don't invest back into the kulaks don't invest back into their business. it's like, have you ever fucking run a you can only say that because you've never run a business. You're constantly finding ways to improve your business. You're constantly finding ways to make things run smoother. And if that means that you have to buy this tool, or, you know, say it's really hot where you're working, you buy this fan, you're constantly looking for things to do. And, you know, I mean, I know people who have started businesses, and I know a guy who started an auto repair shop. He had 3 employees besides himself, and did not take a salary for 2 years. Luckily, his wife was a pharmacist and she made good money. But he didn't take a salary for 2 years. And after 2 years, he started taking $300-400 a week. This place was clearing 18 grand. This place was clearing, you know, 12 to 18 grand a week. Yet he couldn't take any he couldn't take a salary of his own. Money was going back into it. And then these fucking commie pieces of shit want to talk about the labor theory of value and surplus, you know, and the surplus between, you know, what you're getting paid and what they're actually, you know, oh, if you're getting paid $12 an hour, that means they're making $50 an hour. That can only be, the only person who has that opinion is somebody who's never had to operate in the black. You are either a college kid who's listening to your professor, or you grew up in a house listening to that bullshit. Because you do not, until you get out there and you run a business and you have to meet labor, you have to meet rent, you have to meet utilities, materials. You don't know what you're talking about. It's all a theory. Crazy piece of shit that never had a job, who lived off of Engels, his best friend Engels, whose father was a fucking kulak. So, you know, take into, you know, these fucking commies need to take into consideration who their heroes are.
Sure. Yeah. And it's never really thought of the amount of risk that entrepreneurs take on. You look at all the losers, I shouldn't call them losers, but the businesses that didn't work out. The average entrepreneur sees that and says, hey, that could be me. So unless there's a payoff, I'm not going to start. I'm not going to do this startup. And also, it's not just the cost. You have to have an idea that people are voluntarily willing to pay money for. And you have to get a return customer basis. So you're constantly trying to please your customers. The fact that we even have to say this is so ridiculous. And then the regulationists will always say, well, we need regulation because some people are greedy. It is so comfy to be a big company in a regulatory market, because the cost of someone competing with you is so high, the hurdles are so high that only the Walmarts, Targets, the Home Depots, the Lowe's have the money, have the time, have the manpower to comply with all this shit. So what the commie does is they say the problem is companies are too big. We need to regulate them. More regulations stomps out more competitors, making those companies bigger. Then they still have an even bigger boogeyman now. It is so by design. It is so constant and so predictable that I no longer think of it as an accident or as economic ignorance. Of course, 99% of them promoting it are just ignorant, but there is no way Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama, Elizabeth Warren, and then obviously a bunch of Republicans as well, but those are the big outspoken ones. There is no way there's no way they don't understand raising the price of employment hurts people with the fewest amount of skills. There is no way they don't understand that. Impossible. There's no way they think that women get paid, what, 10 cents on the dollar for every dollar a man makes. The greedy companies would just hire women. So getting to that is so important to me.
Well, the one that I've heard all week from these commies, and I told you about it before we went on the air, is I've had the misfortune of dealing with a bunch of college-age commies this week, is they're basically taught that if somebody owns a business and they have employees, they inherited it. They didn't build it. They inherited it. It was inherited. They didn't work for it. it needs to be taken away from them.
Very testable. Very testable.
Of course, but they're not going to do
Hey,
it.
pro-science leftists, let's do this. Look at the 80% of millionaires today are first generation. That's according to the New York Times. People who have no incentive to lie about something like that. If anything, it would be in the reverse. Also, with the kulaks, the bourgeoisie, never invest in the company goes to crap. That I rarely hear that, but you saying that it's a common one. Again, very testable. Let's look at the day 50 companies started, the year they started. Let's look at their buildings, their products they sold, the number of employees they had, the working conditions, and let's see if they've changed, gotten better, worse, or stayed the same today compared to when they started. Literally every single one is better because of the result of capitalist investment within those businesses. So it is just such a clear dedication to anti-reason, anti-thought, anti-scientific method that I don't even know how to communicate to these people. So, perfect circle. This is how you communicate to them, my friends, through memes. It's so easy. You give this to them and say, anything you disagree with, I would love to learn from you. Please explain to me how you can delegate a right to a congressman by voting for them, a right that you don't yourself have. You can follow Mance on Twitter at MNRothbard. Check out his website too. He's got there's 2 podcasts that are very important. His discussion with Scott Horton, most importantly, as well as his one with Adam Kokesh. His website is freemanbeyondthewall.com. Did I get that right?
You got it, man.
Mance, any last words you got? Any final thoughts? Anything you want people to know about the book? I'm sorry I got so heated, but I hold this stuff in all day. So any last word? I will give you the last word for tonight, man.
The book's available on Amazon. You can search Mance Rayder, Freedom Through Memedom. If you search Mance Rayder, I'm pretty sure it's going to come up first.
I will have. I already have the link below in this description.
I'm trying to get a digital version of it out. It's very, what I've come to find out, it is very difficult to do a Kindle version where there is a lot of pictures, and especially pictures, if there's just one section that has pictures, but to format where there's a picture, like the facing page here is a picture, and then the text is right here. We tried it for a couple days, and it just takes it all out of whack, and it makes it very difficult to it just jumbles it. So you have a picture here and the title down here, and there's text here, and the text continues on another page. So a certain amount of after I saw a certain amount of these, I'll try to work on getting a digital version. But for now, I think the layout of the book, the way I laid out the book, I think is great. You open it up, the memes on the left side, the writing corresponding to the meme is on this side, turn pages and everything. So just check it out, and I would say buy it and give it to people. I'm a capitalist, and I have no problem saying that I want to make money. But if it's someone's gonna buy it and they'll tell everybody, they'll leave bad reviews, everything like that. I really think that this is a great way to get people into voluntarism and to get people into libertarianism, and really just to get people thinking philosophically. And really, you could do day one. You could read and study day one in like 3 minutes. It's not difficult. I've made it easy as possible. Something that basically I looked at and I said, how would I want, if I was using this, how would I want it to be laid out? And I said, as easy as possible with the easiest language. Boom, boom, boom. I think it's really simple, and I think it can be a really, really good tool. So, pick it up and pick up a few copies and give them out. I mean, shit, Christmas is right around the corner. it as a gift to somebody that you know, that you think they're ready. Pretty much what I got to say.
Excellent, Mance. Thanks so much for taking the time. I'm sorry I started yelling. I hate communism so much, brother. I can't even explain it.
Yeah, no problem, man. And just let everybody know this is the second time we're doing it, because the first time I did this, we did this before I went to Iceland. I forgot to put headphones in, so your voice was all fucked up and everything, because it was reverberating and it was going into my stand microphone and everything. And I was like, I'm like, shit, I'll make it up to you, man. When can we do it? I'll do it the next day. We could do it. I'll do it at 11 o'clock my time. And you're like, let's go to Iceland, have a good time and everything. We'll do it when we get back. So I was, more than anything, I think the timing was perfect because the book came out last Sunday. So got a chance to talk about it. And I mean,
I'm very glad that we actually waited, because I had a blast reading this, and I would have wanted to have you on again, just so we could BS about it a little. Man, thanks so much, man. I hope to talk to you soon. Again, MN Rothbard on Twitter, freemanbeyondthewall.com, and Freedom Through Memedom, the 31-day guide to waking up to liberty. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. Feel free to leave some comments below. Take care.